Hi everyone, I'm Beej, that's B-E-J-G, and this is my channel Beej Free, where every day I try to transport myself back to 1973. But why 1973? First, 1973 is 20 years before I was born. Second, 2023 is the 50th anniversary of that year. Yes, I know that's just a fancy way of saying it was 50 years ago. But third, after researching the fashion of 1965 the whole way to 1979, I just decided that 1973 had the best styles. So many of the iconic 70s pieces that we think about today are from 1973, but it also had a milder side with timeless clothing that can be worn at any time. Now, I've been a time traveler for a while. I've reenacted parts of the 19th century, parts of the 18th century, and I go to the Renaissance Fair every year I can. I also love sewing costumes from all worlds, but I was looking for a way to bring some of that history, some of that drama into my own life. A quick shout out to all the people who are dressing alternatively because it was you who inspired me. About 2 years, I decided I wanted to convert my entire wardrobe to reflect clothing from the 70s. But it seems I wasn't the only one. Suddenly, 2020 had their own version of 1970 and it was everywhere. This kind of bummed me out because the goal of this was to be different but not fit in. I started thinking about what could I do to make this mine. Welcome to Project 1973. Being an all or nothing person, I went headfirst into researching and planning. This video is going to show you my process so far. I decided I wanted to sew everything instead of trying to buy vintage pieces. To me, it seemed like the simpler and least expensive option. I found a great website that was basically a database of all the sewing patterns from the entire 20th century. They had Simplicity, McCall's, Butterwick, Vogue, and many more that I never even heard of before. I went through all of these patterns for the year of 1973 and saved everything that I liked. Then, using some capsule wardrobe templates, because I've been obsessed with capsule wardrobes for a long time, I was able to narrow it down to what I needed. Next, it was about finding the actual patterns. Thanks to eBay and Etsy, this was way easier than I expected it to be. When searching for vintage patterns, you have to decide early on whether it's more important for the patterns to be in your size or to be the styles that you want. Choosing styles over size could mean that you get stuck with more complicated alterations later on. Personally, I rarely work with patterns that aren't in my size. A lot of the time, I'm looking at drawings of extant patterns and I just redraw them up to my size. So for me, it was more important to get the styles that I wanted, and I ended up with about 15 patterns. Most had more than one garment included. They kind of range everywhere from size 8 to 16, I mean, the whole spectrum. I wanted to get a better idea of styling that everyday people used. So, in addition to asking friends and family what they remembered from that time period, I also found these really great original 1973 J.C. Penney catalogs and even some Sears catalogs. And so I started just going through these and just looking at the fashion and what they were wearing and how they were styling it. I studied the colors, the prints, the accessories, the hairstyles, the shoes, and everything else that I thought would be helpful in creating these looks. Happily enough, in the catalogs, I was seeing some of the same outfits that I had purchased patterns for, and I knew I was on the right track. I feel like one of the misexpectations about the 1970s that I had going into this was that everything was going to be browns and oranges. This really isn't the case. In the catalogs, I showed everything from whites and blues to yellows and reds, but it basically had the same spectrum of colors in the brights and the bolds and the neons and the neutrals and the pastels that we see today in our stuff. This is going to replace the majority of the clothing in my closet, so I really wanted to choose colors that best suit my complexion. I'm a warm autumn, so I used that color palette as a starting point for my fabric shopping. Fabric shopping was probably the most fun. Just like everything else, I started creating a mood board with all the colors and prints that I liked. I took pictures of prints in the catalogs and screenshots of fabrics that I found online. The 70s were full of amazing plaids and florals and, of course, tie-dyes. I wanted to find stuff that looked right, but not too modern. And the fabrics that I felt were perfect, I ordered right away. If I was on the fence about it, I ordered a sample size of about 1/8 yard. I was nervous that the colors pictured wouldn't be the same in person, but honestly, I think all but maybe one was right. I followed the suggestions on the patterns for fabric types, with the exception of trying to limit the polyester, because boy, the 1970s loved their polyester. A lot of these fabrics I've never worked with before because I've always been such a sucker for woven natural fabrics. The final bit of prep work I wanted to do was cut the patterns to size to make cutting and assembling quicker. The patterns that were the correct size, I just cut out, filed in the envelope system that I always use to store patterns. The others I traced on wrapping paper to make them larger or smaller. I am taking a risk and trying not to do a mock-up for every piece. After all the money I've spent on the fashion fabric and the time it's going to take me to actually cut and sew this, I really just don't want to double that to do mock-ups too. This will probably shoot me in the foot at some point, but I'm pretty confident that I can get the sizing close enough, and if I don't, it'll make these videos more entertaining. This brings me up to where I am now. I have done all the pre-planning. This whole process has felt a lot like designing a fashion line. I have broken the patterns into seasons. Each season has a different color scheme. All the seasons are cohesive. And then I also have a base capsule with neutral, everyday, and workwear that I'll still be able to mix and match with the seasonals. I think it actually ended up being patterns for 50 garments. So now it's time to start sewing. This is such a big project and with such perfect timing that I felt I had to document the entire process. In a perfect world, I would sew one a week and have a video for each one, but I've never done vlogs before, and so you'll have to bear with me. I think that's probably more than I can handle. My goal right now is to post one video a month. For an added bonus, I have the top 10 list of books, movies, music, TV shows, and food from that year. I'll be working my way through the list and adding reviews and trivias to the videos as well. If this sounds interesting to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. That way you'll be notified when I do post. Again, sorry if it's not always consistent. Well, that's it for now. Like, comment, tell your friends. I'm Beej, and I'll see you next time we go to 1973. Then using some capsule wardrobes, some templates for capsule wardrobes. Then using some wardrobe templates. Happily enough, the catalogs in the I'm a warm autumn. I wear a lot of colors like this is what happens when you go off script. This is hard. In addition to the videos and to the sewing, I also have the top 10 lists for books, movies, TV shows. We're starting that over. I need a break.